What if I told you that you are missing out on one of the highest potential investments that you can make? An investment of just a single hour of effort that can twofold, fivefold, or even tenfold your output. Welcome to the Notion of Life series, in which we are creating the ultimate Notion system that helps us get more results with less effort. In the last video, we had a look at the project tracker, which is the practical engine that helps us take our goals and turn them into reality. Now, the investment I was talking about earlier is called the weekly review, and that is what we are going to explore in today's video. Now, the weekly review is a 45-minute process that we do at the end of each week, and it helps us to reassess, realign, and recommit to the person that we want to be and the person that we are capable of becoming. Review cycles are the oil that keeps the system running. It gives us something to fall back onto when life happens and when shit hits the fan. And the weekly review in particular is a great investment. The best investments in life are asymmetrical. That means that they have a low risk with a potential high upside. And the weekly review is a perfect example. It's a very low risk. You put in 45 minutes to 1 hour of time every single week, and the potential upside is absolutely enormous. These 50 hours that you will spend on a yearly basis on this weekly review is one of the best investments that you can make. So whether you want to do this weekly review or some other weekly review, I can highly recommend you at least build some sort of weekly reviewing process. Now, before we dive into this video, I would love to hear if you already have some sort of process going on. Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to learn from your setup. And some practical information before we get started. As always, there are timestamps in the description down below, so you can just scroll through the video to the parts that are interesting to you. You can up the playback speed if you want, if you think that I'm not already talking fast enough, and any links, assets, and resources mentioned in this video are linked in the description down below. Let's start with a brief overview of what we're going to discuss in this video. Now, the key goal of the weekly review is to help us transition from one week into the next with clarity and intent. And the weekly review provides us with room to reflect on the past week, then set intentions for the upcoming week. It helps us filter and organize our information flows and structure our projects and actions so that we're set up for optimal execution, because that's what we're doing with the Notion of Life system. We're bringing into alignment who we are with what we do, insight and execution. The chapters of this video is first a recap of the review phase, then an introduction into the weekly review and why it is important. Then we'll have a brief look at the database and its different properties. And then the bulk of this video will be the weekly review template, because that is where the magic happens. And this template has sub-chapters, the first one being reflection and insight. Then after that, project and action processing, knowledge processing and rating, structuring our workspaces outside of the Notion of Life system, and then planning and setting intention for the week ahead. Then last thing there is going to be the weekly review views, and spoiler alert, it's only one view, so this will be a very short part of the video. And of course, we'll end the video with a recap of everything that we have discussed. All right, let's get into it. I'd like to start with a reminder in the form of one of my favorite quotes. We don't rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our systems. Systems are processes that help us take an input and then reliably turn that into a specific output, right? So we're taking something that we have and then we're turning it into something that we want. That is what we are using systems for. Now, a Notion of Life is a system. It's a big system, it's a comprehensive system, it's a complex system, but it's a system nonetheless. It helps us take certain inputs and turn them into certain outputs. So like we discussed in the project tracker video, you can see over here that what we do with this system is we take our wisdom and insight and then we combine that with knowledge and execution to get our desired outcome, to build our desired life. So the first step is knowing what is it that I actually want? It is the why. Thinking about what you actually want. Then when you know what you actually want, then you need to know, how am I going to get there? And that is where we have knowledge, right? That is the practical things we need to know to be able to actually get there. And then the third thing that we need to do is that when we know what we want and when we know how to get there, we need to actually start moving. And that is where we have this execution part. And the review phase of the circle of growth is dedicated to making sure that our system keeps running smoothly, because systems need maintenance, right? The law of the universe is entropy. Things are always falling apart. Disorder is always arising everywhere. And the way we sort of combat this disorder is by having processes in place, making sure that we keep polishing up the system, right? When a plant is growing, we need to give it water. When we are working out hard, we need to eat nutritious food, right? So we need to maintain our systems so that they can keep doing what we want them to do. And that is why we have this review phase over here, right? So brief recap, we have this insight. What is it that I want to do? Who am I? What are my core values, my vision goals? Then we create a plan. We set goals for ourselves. We reverse engineer those into milestones, into actions. Then we structure our workspaces. We structure our knowledge flows in such a way that we can execute optimally. And then after that, we review our systems. We review to see, is this structure still working? Is this plan still working? Then after that, we reflect, and that leads to new insight, right? So the review phase makes sure that our systems keep running smoothly. Now, the beauty of review cycles inside the Notion of Life system is that they're stacked on top of each other. So one review feeds into the next review. And in a previous video, we had a look at the daily review, which is a short review. It's a short feedback loop. We do it today, we see the result tomorrow, right? And we just check in with things like daily actions and how we are feeling today. But then now we are going to cover the weekly review, which is a slightly longer feedback loop, and it covers the medium depth action and knowledge. So we're looking at projects and we're looking at reflections of the past week. And the beauty is that these reviews start feeding into each other. So we use the insights that we collected during the daily review to actually inform our weekly review. So for example, we check in with the reflections that we made during our daily reviews, but we also look at all the actions that we did during this week. And then later on in this series, later on in the system, we're grabbing this weekly review and we're feeding that one into the monthly review. And then we're taking the monthly review and we're feeding that into the quarterly review. And then we're taking that one and we're feeding it into the yearly review. And what you can see in this graph is by feeding these reviews into each other, we get exponential growth. So in the beginning, you might not see a lot of gain, but as we're doing this and as the time progresses, the growth is exponential. And that is how we get to our dream outcome, to the desired life that we really want to be living, because we're continuously checking, we're continuously balancing. Who do I want to be? What do I need to do? On the very tiny micro level, on the intermediate level, and on the big picture level. We keep aligning all these different levels with each other. Now, the important thing to keep in mind here is that a short feedback loop gives us instant reward. So it motivates us right here, right now. We do something, I get the reward, I instantly feel motivated because I know that the thing that I did got me that result. The longer these reviews get, the longer the feedback loop is. So when I get a very cool insight from my yearly review, it might take me a year before I see the benefit of that actual insight. So in the beginning, a lot of this is going to feel like you're putting in work, but you're not really seeing the result. But once you have gone through a full cycle of all of these reviews, then you will see the true power of having a review system in place. Okay. Let's look at the weekly review in specific. And we've already touched upon a few of these parts, but we're just going to quickly run through them one more time. The beginning of the weekly review is about reflecting on your past week. So we're checking in with the reflections that we made during the daily review. We reread some of those that might be catching our attention, where we're like, hey, that day I was thinking about something and I just want to revisit that. But also on a broader level, we just take some time to reflect on the past week. What am I grateful for? Are there things that went well? Were there things I was struggling with? Just taking some time to reflect on what happened in the past 7 days. Then the next thing is that we check in with our knowledge flows. And I would recommend checking out the knowledge database video to get more information about this. But during the weekly review, we check in with all of our active knowledge. Is there still knowledge that I want to spend more time on? Things that I want to explore or that I want to keep exploring? And then also we rate our knowledge. So this is the point where we give ourselves the opportunity to sort of dissect which knowledge is valuable to us and which knowledge maybe isn't as valuable as we initially thought. After that, we are going to organize our projects. And this is what we discussed in the last video. We have these beautiful project dashboards, and then during the weekly review, we check in which ones of these are due to be reviewed. We open up those dashboards, and then inside that project tracker dashboard, we're going to mostly focus on planning the actions. So we're going to see, are there actions that need to be added? Are there actions that need to be deleted or modified? We want to add the expected time that we think we're going to work on them, have that weekly workload figured out. So this is really the practical part of the weekly review. Then after that, we are going to plan the week ahead. We're going to look inside our calendars, see if there's anything that we need to plan or prepare for. And we're also going to grab all these actions and sort of lay them out in a good visual overview so that we have a rough outline of what our week is going to look like. Then next up is cleaning our workspaces, and I really like this icon. I think whoever designed this did a really wonderful job. But we're going to clean our workspaces, both our physical workspaces, so just clean up our desk or clean up our studio or clean up whatever it is we're working in, but also our digital workspaces. So make sure that unnecessary files are deleted from our desktop and just make everything look neat, because, you know, a calm and collected mind is really, really valuable. And then the last part, and this is where we end our weekly review, is by setting intentions for the upcoming week. So this is all about closing the past week, and then we're going to end the review by setting intentions for the upcoming week. So what state of mind do I want to bring to this week? Do I want to be hyper alert, and do I want to be grinding it out? Or do I want to take it easy and relax and connect more with other people? And then also set some goals for ourselves. Like, what is 1 or 2 things that I really want to do this week? I really want to hit my workouts this week, or I really want to bring my A game to my work this week. That is just sort of setting the intention, setting the direction for the upcoming week. Now, there is one very important thing to keep in mind, and that is that we are not working for the system. The system is working for us. It is so easy to fall prey to this, where we want to be perfect. We try to be perfect. We feel that we need to do every single daily review. We need to do every single weekly review. And when I miss one, I have failed. I start feeling bad about myself. And by having this mindset, the thing that we are doing starts becoming less and less fun. It starts becoming more daunting. And I've seen this a lot with myself, with other people. We build the system, we try to be perfect, then as always, we fail to be perfect because no one is perfect, and then we start burning out. And after a while, we just stop using the system altogether, because that is less painful than trying to use it and keep failing. So what I do, and what I'd highly recommend you to do, is to have peace with the fact that we are not perfect and we are going to fail to use this review. And that is perfectly fine, because the review cycles, and especially the weekly review, have been designed in such a way that even if you would miss 3 reviews in a row, you can just do 1 weekly review, and it sort of functions like a reset button. You press that button and you're all good to go again. The whole slate is clean. Everything is working again. So the whole goal of this system is that when you are not doing it for a while, you have something to fall back onto. It actually gives us more peace of mind, and it should give us more freedom to do what we want to do and not feel like a slave to this specific system. And as an example, I think in the last year, I did around 40 weekly reviews. So that means for 12 weeks, I did not do my weekly review. And the daily reviews are even worse, quote unquote. I only did 200 daily reviews. Now, you can already hear me say only. you can also flip that on its head and say, I did 200 daily reviews and I did 40 weekly reviews, and the value that I got from those are fucking tremendous. So yeah, keep that in mind. We are not working for the system is working for us. And just keep it playful. Don't judge yourself if you don't do it perfectly. Nobody does it perfect, and we are here for the long run, right? We want to consistently chip away. We want to get to that point where we consistently keep chopping away. That requires us to keep going. So be gentle and enjoy the ride. All right, now the time that you have all been waiting for, because I can just feel it from across the screen. You're like, Fran, it's time for Notion, baby. Okay, let's do it. Let's go straight into Notion. And the first thing, as always, is that we're going to open our database collection zone. And now we're just going to scroll down to the review databases, and we're going to open up this weekly review over here. Now, let's start with a look at the master table and its properties. As always, the first property is the week name, and Notion does not allow us to remove the name property. So what I tend to do here is just give a shorthand of the date span in which this weekly review takes place. And that is also the second property right after it. So over here, I would say, for example, 1st of February, and the end date is the 10th. Actually, that's on a full week. Let's just say Saturday to Saturday, February 3rd till February 10th, right? So we have the name and we have the date span. Then next up, we have a relationship to the daily review database. So these two databases are communicating with each other. And the reason we have that, the sole reason we have that, is so that we can roll up statistics and habits from the daily review. So over here, for example, you can see this dummy entry is related to these dummy entries of the daily review. And were I to open up one of these pages, so let's just grab this February 23, then over here you can see we're tracking some stuff inside of this daily review, right? We're tracking some habits and we're tracking some statistics. Now, I would refer you to the daily review to learn about how to use this tracking inside of the daily review. But for now, you can see we're tracking that stuff, and then over here, we're rolling up this information into the weekly review. So the first roll-up we have is for statistics. This is for the geeks out there that like to measure quantifiable things. And over here, you can see that this roll-up is basically taking this relationship with the daily review, right? So we have this weekly review database and daily review database communicating with each other. They're linked with each other. And then we're saying from this relationship to this daily review, I want to grab the property statistic number 1. So that's the one that we just saw, and it's taking the statistic and then giving me the average. So if I've been tracking the entire week, it gives me the average of this statistic. Now, over here, statistic 2 is doing the same thing. And then over here, we have a roll-up of the habits. So it's a very similar setup. Once again, it's a relationship to the daily review, but now it's grabbing this property called daily review. And that is the habit box that we are ticking during our daily review. So I'll just quickly show that. I'll go back into this daily review over here, go down here and track our daily habits. And it's empty now because the filter is a dynamic filter that is set to today. But suppose I would be doing a daily review today, then over here, we would be tracking these habits, right? So by tracking these habits, that is the same habit that we're seeing right over here. So we have a roll-up, which is saying from all these daily reviews, grab these habits and roll them up in a nice visual overview, right? So we have a very minimalistic database over here with just a few properties. And the reason it's so minimalistic is because all of the magic happens inside of the template. So let's have a look at the weekly review template. So we're going to go over here, have this default weekly review template, edit it, open it up, and now let's explore. If this video is valuable to you, then please like and subscribe down below. It really does help. The first thing that you'll see is that we have all of these properties that we just discussed right over here because we want to quickly have an overview of the things that we've been tracking in the last week. So were I to open a filled out review. You can see over here, we have a heat map of our different habits. So in one quick glance, we can see how successful we were with our habits, and we have the average of the statistic over here, right? So that's why we have these properties at the top of the page, and then the rest of the review has been chopped up into different chapters. So let's start with the reflection and insight chapter. Now, the first thing that we do during our weekly review is we check in with our insight zone. Now, we're going to explore the insight zone in depth in a later video, but I'll give you a brief sneak peek right now. So I'll go into my insight zone, and then inside of this insight zone, we're going to pick one of these entries over here to explore more deeply. And this could take a minute, it could take 5 minutes, it could also take an hour, right? You can spend as much time as you want inside the insight zone, because what we are doing here is aligning with that deeper self, with our deeper desires, with our life purpose, with our long-term vision for life. So let's say, for example, I want to check in with this principle over here. Do the bare minimum amount of work that is needed to sustain yourself, and past that, only get paid for doing what you love. This might be a principle that's very dear to my heart, and I just want to remind myself of why did I set this principle. So then over here, I can read through a bunch of the reflections that I wrote about this, right? Escaping the soul-crushing pain of working on things I don't believe in. That is what this principle means to me. Okay, let's go a bit deeper into that, right? I want to reread some of this stuff. Maybe I want to write some extra stuff about this principle. I'm just taking some time to realign with what is important to me, realign with my core values, my core principles, my core desires, right? That is why we're spending some time in this insight zone. And like I mentioned, we're going to have a whole video about the insight zone later on, about all of these different databases that are in there. But for now, just know that that is the first part of this weekly review. Okay, then we tick this box. So we have done that insight zone part. Then next up, we're going to check in with the intentions that we set for the upcoming week during last week's review, because we fill this section in during the end of the previous review, right? When we end the review, we create the next one and we set some intention. Now, actually, it makes more sense to open up this dummy entry because there's actually some stuff in here. So over here, you can see I already set some intentions for the upcoming week. And then we just briefly check in with these reflections. Did I actually end up doing what I wanted to do? Was my state of mind the one that I wanted, or was there something else? It's just checking in, like how much alignment was there between my initial intention and what actually ended up happening. Then the next few over here are all of the reflections that we made during our daily reviews. And we have a filter over here that says only show reflections made in the past week. So this is once again a dynamic filter. And then in here, we can open up one of these questions and then look at all of the reflections for that specific question. Now, right now, there's only one reflection in there, but if you've been doing your review consistently, right, this is what we talked about earlier with layering these feedback loops on top of each other, layering these review cycles on top of each other. You will have a whole list of reflections here. You might even have 7 reflections per question, and then you can simply pick one that stands out to you and just read through it and basically get ourselves back in touch with everything that happened during the past week. Because reflecting from this vantage point is quite difficult. We have this bias, this recency bias, to be more influenced by things that happened very recently. So we're doing a weekly reflection, but maybe what might end up happening is that we're only reflecting on the past 2 days, or just on like the first thing that stands out to us. And by reading through these reflections that we made in real time, we get a fuller picture of what actually happened during the past week. So that is why we're checking in with these reflections that we made in the past week. In a similar vein, we check in with all of the actions that we completed last week. Now, this serves a dual purpose. The first purpose is that it just feels good. We can get lost in everything that we're doing, and we might feel like we're not really being productive, and that day I didn't finish my to-do list, and the other day some things popped up and I didn't really get around to everything I wanted to do. Having this list at the end of the week shows us just very factually like, hey, I've been doing all of these actions, and that feels good. So it just gives us like this little hit of reward. And I think that is like the first purpose. The second one is once again to remind ourselves of what it is that we've actually been doing during the past week, because having these two in place helps us to then actually make a fuller reflection in this section of the review, because this is where we have some reflection questions on which we really think about what we did last week. Now, as always, you can modify and change anything that you see in this system, right? You can modify this template. You can also modify these reflection questions. These are just some prompts that I am using to help myself reflect on the past week. Now, the first question is, what am I particularly grateful for, right? I think it's always nice to take a moment and feel some gratitude. Gratitude is one of the best life enhancers that we have. So we take some time and think about what I am grateful for. I was grateful for spending time with my friends last weekend. Beautiful, beautiful little reflection. We can open that up, and then inside of this writing space, we can add some extra context. Sometimes this is just one paragraph. Sometimes I have half books written in this writing space. So this is just the place to reflect. Then the second question is, what was challenging or painful or just flat out sucked this week? So this is about some friction that we had, some obstacle, some challenge that we needed to overcome. And then the third question is, what is something that went well? What am I proud of doing? Is there something that I did? Was there an achievement that I made? Just anything that went well. And like that, we have a little section of questions. And like that, we have a few questions that help us reflect. Now, what I usually tend to do is that when I'm going through these reflections, for example, or when I'm going through my actions, there's already like some things popping in my head. So then over here, I'll just make a little bullet list and write down the insight. Just very shorthand, so that when I get to the weekly reflection, I can use this list as input for those reflections. So this is just, I use something to quickly order my mind a little bit. Okay, so then the next chapter that we have over here is the review section of the weekly review. So here we're really tuning in with the system. And the first thing that we're going to do is have a look at our active projects. Now, in the last project tracker video, we briefly had a look at this view. And this view is made in such a way that we, in a glance, can have an overview of how all of our projects are coming along. Now, inside of this dummy system, it's only one project, but inside your own Notion of Life system, this will probably be like 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 projects. So over here, we can see the progress. How far along is this project? Then over here, we have the weekly workload, which is the amount of time we're going to be spending in the upcoming week on this project. Then we have the review date with a little formula over here that says this review is due, and the days past date, which is how many days this project is past the original date that we scheduled it for. Now, this one over here is what we want to pay attention to, because if the review date is due, that means we want to review this project. So we just open up this project dashboard from here, and then over here, we are going to look at the different resources for our project. Now, as a brief reminder, what we are doing here is we start with this wisdom and insight. We try to figure out what is it that we want to do, what resonates with our core values. And then we combine knowledge and execution, what we do and actually doing it to move into that direction. And this knowledge and execution together is our production capacity, right? So we try to increase our production capacity to actually be able to do the things in this world that we want to do. And that is what we have this project tracker for. Now, usually what I do during the weekly review is I check in with the timeline. I don't have a timeline for every project, but if I do have a timeline, I check in with the timeline. I see if everything is still up to date, if there's anything that needs to be changed, that needs to be changed in time, or that needs to be deleted or added, right? Maybe this one has to go over here. Maybe this one should be slightly longer. Maybe I want to add a new phase to the project, right? So I just check in with that timeline, and then I go into the actions. And this is really where the bulk of the work happens in relation to the weekly reviews. I don't really look at the habits and the knowledge pieces. Those are all taken care of in different parts of the system. I also don't really look at the scratchpad. I usually do this in one single session. I just take the whole scratchpad and I'll just organize that in different ways. And if you want, I can make a video on how I do that. So it's mainly about checking in with the actions. And then in here, I take a look at which actions really need to happen this week. So maybe this week I need to start planning all of these sub actions. So then what I do is I assign it a due date. Let's say I put the due date for Monday 29th. Then over here you can see that I'm going to give it a projected input of 60 minutes of effort. And then over here you can see that weekly workload is automatically calculated. And let's also just do the same for these tasks. Let's just all put them on 30, for example. 30, just to show you how this would work. 31st, they all have a projected input. Maybe I give them a priority, right? I think this one is really important. This is going to be a big win. And I don't give all of them priorities. I usually just give like the very important one priorities, because later on we're going to schedule actions for the whole week. And I actually usually put the priorities there, because then I have a daily action list with priorities, which I think is much more helpful. So we filtered out these action items. Maybe some of them can also be removed. Maybe we need to add one more item. I need to send that one email. So just for the project, take some time to do the very practical action planning. Now, over here you can see that the weekly workload for this project has increased to 4.5 hours. And this is something we discussed in the project tracker video, but basically this calculates the projected input of all of the action items that are planned for the upcoming week. And it calculates that with this formula over here, and then rolls that up into the project. And now, when we go back into our weekly review, you can see that this weekly workload has changed to 4.5 hours. Now, why this is so powerful is because when we have multiple projects going on, all of them are going to have a weekly workload. And then over here at the bottom of this table, we can see the sum of the entire weekly workload. So we get a rough idea of how much all of these different actions that we scheduled for all of these different projects, how much workload that is going to give in the upcoming week. Usually to me, a weekly workload is around 20 hours of productive work on very concrete actions. So then I know that if I scheduled 30 hours, I'm not going to make that this week. Or if I scheduled 10 hours, maybe I can schedule something more in a specific project. So we have a nice overview of how much time we spent per project and also how much time we spent in total. And that is why I think that this weekly workload formula is so powerful. Then the next 3 tabs that we have over here are linked versions of the action tracker. Now, the first one is actions that have a status of waiting on. So these are actions that I've started, but now I need someone else before I can finish it. I put something into the world and now I need to get feedback or I need to get input from someone else. So over here you can just see, is there still something that I'm waiting for a response from someone else? And the other one is actions that have a status of someday. Sometimes you have actions where you're like, I would really like to do this someday, but I don't have a specific plan. It's not a specific project. It's just something I want to keep in my system somewhere. You can put it over here with a status of someday. Now, full disclosure, I rarely ever use either of these. This is a perfect example of tweaking the system to fit your personal need. I put them in there because I know they can be useful, but I personally don't really use these a lot. And then over here, we have the action date calendar. And this is actually a very important view because when we were putting all our actions in this project tracker, these actions will pop up on our calendar, right? Because we just scheduled these actions. Let me just open up that project tracker that we were just in. We just scheduled these actions for the upcoming week, and any change that we make in here, we are of course going to see that in this calendar. And if we're doing this for all of our projects, this whole calendar starts filling up. And then we can use this view to start creating to-do lists for the upcoming week, right? So we start planning a rough structure of our actions for the upcoming week. And I use the word rough here because once again, the system is working for us, right? We're not working for the system. So we want to make a rough plan, but don't overly plan ourselves. And I guess, life happens in seasons. So maybe you have a season where you want to be overly structured, and maybe you have a season where you don't want to have as much structure. You can structure as much as you want. I just tend to make a rough structure of the different actions for the week. Then next up, these are checked because we are in the templates. I'm just going to uncheck these real quick, is that we have a review of our calendar, because we can track a lot inside of Notion, but there's also things that we're tracking outside of Notion. And for me, I'm using my calendar for all of the external meetings, where I have meetings or things going on with other people. Now, over here, there's a calendar link to Google Calendar, but the other day, Notion also released Notion Calendar, so that is something that we can explore in a future video. But for now, I just go open this calendar, then I look through the previous weeks. I also look into the upcoming weeks, and I try to see if there's anything that needs a follow-up or anything that I need to prepare for. And I'm not going to scroll through my calendar because I don't know if there's personal information in there. But just like that, we check in. Is there anything that needs to happen based on my calendar, based on my external things that I have planned? If there are, I can simply add a new action over here and make sure that that follow-up is taken care of. All right, so we're just going to tick off these calendar boxes. Then next up, we have the knowledge review. Now, this dummy entry is almost a year old, so this is also an older version of the system. So what I'm going to do is actually go back into this template over here, and then we're going to scroll down, and we're going to have the knowledge review. The first part of the knowledge review is looking at all of the knowledge pieces that are active, that have a next action of either keep exploring or to explore. And usually what happens for me is that I just use this as a reminder for what is still active. There's limited time in a week. There's limited time in life. And when you're getting started on your journey, on your personal journey, professional journey, you tend to have a lot of time. But as you start getting deeper and deeper into your development, things are going to get bloated. There's going to be so much things to do, so much information to take care of. This is also why we want to keep this knowledge flowing, because you're not going to hit everything. You're maybe going to hit like 1 or 2 knowledge pieces. So this is what happens for me. Like, I have so much stuff I'm putting into this system. So it just keeps it flowing. And I use this as an overview to see, is there a specific creation and idea that I still want to check in with? Is there a meeting that I still need to follow up with? Is there a learning I want to develop further? I can just have these separate tabs open. And then over here, you can see how many days are left for this knowledge piece. So this particular one over here, probably created that during another video, just like that, create a knowledge piece. This particular one over here is going to disappear in 4 days. So in 4 days, the status is going to change from keep exploring to completed. And I would refer you to the knowledge database video to learn more about how all of this works. But basically, I have a quick overview and I can see these knowledge pieces. Now, if you want, of course, you can also just go into these knowledge pieces right now. If you want to review them right now, just go for it, right? If you want to spend a few hours on your weekly review, you want to take, an hour to check in with your insight zone, and you want to take like 2 hours to revisit some of those most important knowledge pieces, then all power to you. You can do that, right? It works. The process works. But if you just want to remind yourself, just briefly scroll through it. So if you would want to review it in the moment, of course, you can just open up the page over here and check in with this specific knowledge piece. All right, so that's the part where we review the knowledge pieces that are active. Then the next part is rating our knowledge. Now, during the knowledge database video, we explored these different rating properties. When we're creating knowledge pieces and we're processing them during our daily review, we give them either a 1, 2, or 3-star rating. The reason we do this is because in the moment, ideas often feel very good. We think up something new and we're like, yeah, this is it. This is the next thing. This is what I want to commit to. This is what I want to learn about. But then a week later, our mind is somewhere else, and actually that idea turned out not to be that valuable. So that is why at the end of the week, we give ourselves the opportunity to upgrade knowledge pieces to the 1 or 2 diamond categories. So basically, this is a way for us to check, did it withstand the test of time? And if it did, if this particular knowledge piece is actually as valuable as I initially thought, or maybe even more valuable, then we can drag it up here and we can either give it 1 diamond or we can give it 2 diamonds. Now, Notion is always going to ask this. I don't know how to remove this, so just press don't remove because we want to keep the sorting. And just like that, we can add another rating to our knowledge piece. Now, what you can see over here is that we have this days left property, which means how much more time can we spend on this particular knowledge piece. And the cool thing here is that when we increase the rating, part of this formula is to say that when the rating is higher, I want to have more days to work on this knowledge piece. So, for example, when this one was still 3 stars, it was already done, right? We're already done working on this knowledge piece. There's no more days left, and it's not showing up in this next action views because the status is completed. But actually, it's a valuable knowledge piece. I want to spend more time on it. I'm upgrading it to this 2 diamond section. And automatically, this formula calculates that we have more days to work on. And once again, in the knowledge video, we explore in depth how this all works, how this formula works, how many more days you have. But over here, you can now see the action is once again, keep exploring, and we have 19 more days. So upgrading the rating also gives us more time to work on something. Okay, then the next part of this review section is emptying all of our external inboxes. So these are our email inboxes, WhatsApp inboxes, any inboxes in which we get information from the outside world. Now, I'm going to create a separate video on how to do inbox 0, which basically means that every inbox that you have at the end of the week is empty. We make sure that everything is empty. So any knowledge piece that comes in is always processed. We either delete it, we either turn it into an action item, or we turn it into a knowledge piece inside our knowledge database. So we make sure that everything that comes in is going to its proper place. So we do that for our email inbox, we do that for our WhatsApp inbox, any other inboxes that we might have. And I will make a separate video on how to do this. So we empty all of our inboxes, and then we move on to the structuring part of the weekly review. And over here, we have 3 simple checkboxes because these are all things that we do outside of the Notion systems. The first one is to clean up our desktop. So over here, I'm having a clean desktop on my laptop. I want to make sure that there's not like a whole bunch of files and images and just shit flooding my screen. So I'm just cleaning up my desktop. Then the second thing is cleaning up any important folders. If there's an important folder that you use a lot, for example, you might have your downloads folder or you might have an editing folder. If there's any folders that you have on your computer, clean them up, make sure they're organized. And then the third one is cleaning up our physical workspace, right? Having a clean environment to work in helps us stay focused. It helps us be on top of our shit, right? Because we are very much influenced by our environment. So take some time to just put away the trash, set everything up so that when you come to work the next day or after the weekend, everything is set up nicely and you're just ready to get after it. Everything's clean, everything's organized. That's why we're structuring all of these workspaces. So we're just gonna tick that one off. And then we're heading into the last part of the review. Now, over here, we have a link that says create next week's review. And when I click on this one, I'm going into the weekly review database. And over here, I'm going to say create a new weekly review template. I'm going to set the date span to the upcoming week, right? So this is going to be a review for the upcoming week. And a brief note here is that sometimes this is more than a week. If you did not do your weekly review for 2 weeks, for example, the date span can be longer. And that is perfectly fine. So usually you just set it to a week, but if for whatever reason you spend more than a week on it, you could just change the date span over here. And then I give it the title, Jan 25, Jan 31. And what I do, I learned this trick from August Bradley, is I put 2 arrows in front of it. And the reason I do this is because when I want to visit the active weekly review, I can just simply search for these 2 little arrows and I immediately find this page. So I always put 2 arrows on the active review that I have. That's just a little trick for searching for this weekly review. And then over here, this should have loaded by now, so I'm just going to go out and back in. You can see these 2 reflection questions that we started out with in the beginning of this review template. So then over here, I'm going to set my intention for the upcoming week. Right, this week, I want to be calm, collected, and supportive to people around me. And then I'm also going to set some key objectives. I want to finish recording the weekly review video. And just like that, we've reflected on the past week, and now we set some intention, set some spirit, set some energy for the upcoming week. When we did that, we go back into our current weekly review, the one we're doing. I'm going to check this box. I did set the intention and state of mind for the next week. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the daily review template to this weekly review. So we just created this one. We're going to link that to the weekly review. And now whenever we make a new daily review, right? So let me just go into the execution zone, make a daily review, create a new one. It's automatically related to this weekly review, which then in turn allows us at the end of the week, let me open up the database collection zone to show you. It's linked over here, and then it's automatically tracking all of these things. So as we're doing our daily reviews, we don't have to manually add these later on. They're just being tracked inside of this weekly review, and that will help us to have these roll-ups of all these properties that we are tracking. Okay, so let's go back into this weekly review template. And then we check that box, and then it is time to reward yourself because you just made a great investment. You made this asymmetrical investment that has a huge potential upside. You spent some time in the here and now to invest in your future. So celebrate that. Go sit in the sauna. That's what I like to do. Go have a beer with a friend. Go do something fun because you once again did your weekly review, and that should be celebrated. Now, one last note on the weekly review template. I tend to do my reviews either on Friday or on Sunday, but you can take any day that you want. Just find something that works for you, that you can do consistently, and that feels right. Last thing we're going to discuss. I'm going to go back into this database is the different views. And like I briefly mentioned in the beginning of this video, there's just one single view that we have for the weekly review. And that is basically all of the reviews that we have inside of the review zone. It's simply a list view. Over here, the layout is set to list, which is sorted by date span descending, meaning the most recent one is on the top and the latest one is on the bottom. And these live inside of the review zone. So over here you can see all of our reviews in one single place. We can easily revisit one of the old reviews, and yeah, that is the only view that we have for the weekly review. All right, let's briefly recap what we discussed in this video. First, we had a look at the importance of a system, and a system is a process that helps us to reliably turn an input and turn that into the desired output. Now, inside of a notion of life, we do this by aligning insight with knowledge and execution. We first figure out what it is that we actually want, what it is that we desire, our why. Then we try to figure out how to get there. The knowledge is how are we going to get that desired outcome? And then the execution is actually doing that. Now, we need reviews in order to keep our systems running. Every system needs maintenance, and a notion of life is no different. It needs maintenance, and it needs maintenance on all of these different levels, which is why we have these layered review cycles, right? We have our daily review, our weekly review. So as we are stacking them on top of each other, and as we are using them for longer periods of times, we create exponential value, working towards that dream outcome, that desired life that we have. Then we had a look at the different parts that constitute the weekly review, but I'll just show you those inside of the template because that is where we covered all of them. So over here we have the weekly review template. we had a look at this reflection and insight section where we check in with our insight zone, we check in with our intentions that we set for the upcoming week during our previous review, we check in with all of the daily reflections that we made, all of the action items that we've completed during this week, and some reflection questions that we do right here, right now, to think back about the past week. What am I grateful for? What was difficult? What am I happy with? Then we moved into this review section, which is the more practical part, right? And first we do the active projects, mainly scoping all of these different action items that we're planning to work on for these specific projects. Then we have this waiting on and someday view that personally I'm not really using. And then we have this action date calendar, which we can use to create action lists for the upcoming week. After that, we had the calendar review. So we're taking this external stuff, meetings we have with other people, things that are happening in relationship to other people, and we're also adding anything that needs a follow-up or a preparation. We're adding that right over here to this action date calendar. Then we have our knowledge review, the first one being all of the active knowledge pieces, things that have a status of either keep exploring or to explore. We can either go into that right over here or just use it as a reminder that these are still things that we want to cover. And then over here, we have the knowledge rating part, which gives us the opportunity to give our knowledge a 1 or 2 diamond rating. Then after that, we empty all of our inboxes. We make sure that any external communication, any external knowledge pieces have been processed. We either delete them, we either turn them into an action item, or we turn them into a knowledge piece. And I'm going to make a future video on how to do this in an efficient way. Then we structured our workspaces, which is all happening outside of the Notion system. We're cleaning up our desktop, any important folders we might have, our physical workspace, and then we end the review with creating the next week review, right? And also filling in the intention for the upcoming week, any objectives that we might want to hit. And then lastly, we set this daily review template filter so that the daily review and weekly review are automatically related to each other. And then we celebrate the good work that we do. Lastly, we also checked in with these different properties, right? We have the week name, we have the date span, which is the time in which the weekly review takes place, this relationship to the daily review, and then the roll-ups of these different statistics, these different habits, which we will also see during our weekly review. And then all of our reviews live inside of this all review view, which of course we can find in the review zone. And I don't think I've said the word review so many times. In the review zone. If you made it to this part of the video, then I'm very curious to hear which part of the weekly review resonated most with you. Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to build the Notion of Life system from scratch using these videos, then all power to you. However, if you want to use it right here, right now, you can now purchase the template on my website. However, I never want money to be the reason people cannot get access to my material. So if you currently can't afford the template for whatever reason, just send me an email and I'll give it to you for free. Now, once again, all the links, assets, and resources mentioned in this video are linked in the description down below. In the next video, we are going to explore the habit tracker, which is the element that helps us to build, create, and integrate habits. And if you want to follow this whole series along, there's a playlist on my channel with all of the Notion of Life videos. There's also a playlist with all of the videos where we're just doing the Notion bits. And for now, I just want to thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. And don't forget, make this investment, make this 1 hour investment on a weekly basis, and you will see a disproportional output. Take care.